The content you're about to enjoy comes from the archives of The Best You. We're devoted to the very best in personal development, with a platform and resources dedicated to inspiring and changing people's lives. At The Best You, we work with the world's leading writers and trainers on the evolution of the self, and people whose journeys have been affected by their work and words. For more information, go to www.thebestyou.co. This is a very special interview because it's a very special man. This is Bill Curbishley, manager of The Who and manager of so many great bands. Curbishley started his career in the music business in the early 1970s at Track Records, managing tours for The Who and other artists such as Thunderclap Newman, Golden Earring and The Crazy World of Arthur Brown. Curbishley produced The Who's film Tommy, the prison movie MacVicar, and also the film Buddy Song, all starring The Who's Roger Daltrey. After a royalty dispute, Curbishley's company acquired management of The Who in 1976 and soon expanded to manage other well-known artists such as Judas Priest and Robert Plant. In 1994, Curbishley assumed management of guitarist Jimmy Page. He was an integral part in the reuniting of Page and Plant, both former members of Led Zeppelin, and in 1995, despite failed attempts by others to reunite the pair, Curbishley was able to persuade the previously reluctant Plant to work with Page again, resulting in a highly successful unleaded album, video and world tour. Trinifold Music has published songs recorded by many other artists including Chicago, Kenny Rogers, Atlantic Starr, Karen White, Faith Hill and Kenny Chesney. In 2004, UB40 and Rachel Fuller were added to Trinifold's roster. In 2001, Curbishley served as executive producer of the BBC One documentary on the life of Reggie Kray. He later embarked on more film production projects, including films such as The Railway Man. He is currently co-producing a film about the life of Keith Moon with Roger Daltrey. So as I said at the beginning of this long presentation, but it really doesn't cover half of what he's actually done. The reason I wanted to interview Bill is because he's just a fountain of knowledge. The man has worked with every band. He's worked with the Beatles. He's worked with the Rolling Stones. He knows anyone and everyone in music. But apart from that, he's an amazing film producer. So you're going to love this interview. It's I think this was scheduled for around 25 minutes, and I think we were still talking after an hour. There's not a lot that you can interrupt Bill, because everything he says is so interesting. So I am sure, 100% confident you're going to love this. And I think I've said this before with a few others. When Bill speaks, people listen. So I definitely invite you to listen to this interview because it's fantastic. Hi, I'm Bernardo from The Best You, and today I'm here with Bill Curbishley, the legend, the music producer, music manager, and film producer, and many, many other things. Bill, how are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
How's things?
All right, great. Overworked, underpaid, but everything's good.
Tell me a little bit about where were you brought up and what was the early years like?
I was born in Forest Gate in the East End of London, and at the age of, and funnily enough, after the 11 plus, I went to a school in Canning Town at Trinity Church. It was South West Ham Technical School. So I had to do quite a long bus ride. But it was about a year after that, maybe 2 years at the most, that we actually moved into Canning Town. My dad worked in the docks. He was a marine engineer. He was a chief engineer in the Royal Navy. After the war, went into the docks in shipbuilding and ship repair, so we were closer to the Docklands. And so, we moved into Canning Town, and I was the oldest child of 6 kids. I had 3 brothers, and 2 sisters. The next brother down to me, unfortunately, died 15 years ago. But that was the family, 6 kids, and very wide difference between the ages. You know, I was the oldest, and the youngest My youngest brother is like 20 years younger. So there was quite a wide span between us. And, so coincidentally, one of my other brothers, Alan, he went to the same school. We were both told by a couple of the teachers and the headmasters that we'd never come to anything. So if they're still alive, I'd like to tell them we did.
And what was school like for you?
In a way, it was great. But I found it a little bit of an impediment. I wanted to be out there doing things. And we were quite a poor family. So for me, from a very early age, life was about work. And as I was quite big and quite tall for my age. So what I would do in the school holidays is I would go to work on a building site or something, pretend that I was a lot older, tell them that I'd just left one job and I was waiting for my card, so I went on the emergency tax. But for me, to do 4 or 6 weeks' work and earn a man's wages was fantastic.
Eventually, you're very creative. How did you get into music? Tell me about all that.
The thing is, in those days, it's not like today, where you have maybe 200, 300 applicants for every job. In those days, you could change a job on a Friday, leave a job on a Friday, you'd have another one by Tuesday. The choice was fantastic, So I started off on leaving school. I was an apprentice draftsman. My father wanted me to be a civil engineer draftsman. I found it incredibly boring. I sat under a big clock in an office in Westminster. And this clock had a really loud tick. And in the end, I was counting every minute. And I looked at the office manager who turned up every day on his little scooter with a pipe, a moustache and a crash helmet. And I thought, fuck that. That wasn't for me. He got very upset, my father, when I left that. I went across to Jersey. And I was just having a good time. I went over there. I was working with the divers who were clearing the marina there, and I had a really fantastic summer. And I had lots of various jobs, and then along with an old friend of mine, who featured later in what I ended up doing, we both went into the Merchant Navy, and. The trip I was doing was a worldwide trip, 5.5 months. But it took a lot longer than that because every time I found somewhere good, I just jumped. And because I honestly thought I may never come back again, to these places. Ironically, after that, I never stopped travelling. So anyway, jumping forward a little bit, came back. And the boy that I went away with, we wanted to go away together on the same boat, but we couldn't. So he went on one, I went on another. And he was one of my schoolmates. His name was Mike Shaw. And he came back before me because, as I said, I stretched mine out. And he went into the theatre. We were always into music. We were arch mods. That's what we were, and we used to come down of a lunchtime to the Lyceum, because that's where the mods went. They had lunchtime dance sessions and music sessions. We used to go to the Tottenham Royal. We used to go down to Brighton, which got very involved because, as I don't know if you know about it, but the history of Brighton was that's where the mods used to go. Invariably would end up fighting with rockers, and that was it. But we were always into our area of music, And the music we loved as youngsters was blue beat, ska, and then we moved in. Then one day, as a young man, I heard a song, and I thought, wow, where's that come from? Who's this guy? And it was Elvis Presley. And I couldn't believe that he was white. I thought he's got to be black, singing like that. But he was white, and that's how we were. We were immersed in music. We were immersed in fashion. And we used to go down. In those days, you didn't have big record stores per se. we used to go down to the local market, street market, and that's where you'd hear all the new songs and all the new releases. So Mike went into theatre, and he was working on lighting for Norman Wisdom, who was an old comedian. Mm-hmm. And then he, along with another old friend of mine, who we were all part of a little gang of mods, Chris Stamp, he was the brother of Terence Stamp, the actor. And Terence had only just been sort of, I guess, discovered, if that's the right word, and he was put into a big movie called Billy Budd. So he became, straight away, the face, the new face, you know. And Terence Stamp was then the current idol, matinee idol, along with Gene Shrimpton and Alan Bates, lots of different actors. So Mike and Chris were into music, and they started a little record production company. And they also joined forces with a guy called Kit Lambert, who was the son of Constant Lambert, classical conductor and composer. He was from a very different background to us. He was public school boy, very posh, but with a really good creative mind. After they'd been going for about a year or so, Mike said, "You've got to come and work with us. You know, we're doing stuff and we're making music, and you've got to come and work with us." So I went with them really as an experiment.
If you're interested in working with me, contributing to the magazine, maybe speaking at any of our many events around the world, partnering or licensing The Best You, go to www.thebestyou.co.
After about a year or so, we got really lucky. There was a guy called Peter Meaden, who was a very creative entrepreneurish type guy, but he was also pretty unpredictable in lots of ways. And he actually found a band called the Rolling Stones, was with them for a little while and sold them for £500 to Andrew Oldham. Then he found a band called the High Numbers, which he then sold on to Kit and Chris for £400 or £500. But as he was just prior to selling them, he changed their name to the Who. He wrote the first two singles from Peter Meaden, Zoot Suit and I'm the Face, and it was all about attracting that mod audience, you know. And that was when I came in with them, and from there we were all in our own. I would say Mike Shaw wasn't, but we three were a bit crazy, you know. Mike Shaw was more disciplined and a little bit cautious about life, but we were just like, and we got tremendously lucky. We had people bring us things. There was a musician who was in a band called The Animals with Eric Burden. He came to us with a guy that he thought, or he said was fabulous. We went to see him, and he was. And it was Jimi Hendrix. They picked up Mark Bolan and T-Rex. And we just had fantastic times, you know. That was the latter part of the 60s. And we had a lot of good luck and good fortune, you know. And we had, I suppose, we knew what we were doing. I guess we did, but we weren't very good on the finance side. But Kit and Chris really started suffering. They were locked into their addictions, and I tried to keep it afloat for a number of years, and in the end it fell apart. And the Who said to me, "Well, what do we do? We want you to manage us, but what do we do?" So, and they were interlocked. They were fighting each other, Kit and Chris. It was right on the point where we were making a movie of Tommy.
Tell me, what was the film Tommy about, to tell the viewers?
Tommy, yeah. Well, Tommy was based on an album that Pete Townsend had written, and it was a story of a deaf, dumb and blind boy. But the deaf, dumb and blind boy was really only a vehicle. It was really only a vehicle for him to put through the message of enlightenment. And so on one level it was quite a dramatic narrative, but on the other level underneath it, it was pointing towards enlightenment, discovery of oneself, your sensibilities, etc., etc. And it became, and the other point about it was, the album didn't really have, it had different songs and it followed a storyline, but it didn't really, it left it to the listener's imagination. There wasn't really a direct narrative in that sense. So once the film was scripted, Stigwood got Ken Russell, who was then, in those days, he was a brilliant, unpredictable director. And he got Oliver Reed, Anne Margaret, Jack Nicholson, who wasn't a great star. That he became a great star, but he wasn't so great in those days. He wasn't such a big name. And that was our movie. And Roger Daltrey played the part of Tommy. Much later, we made another movie, which again was a conceptual piece written by Pete Townsend, and I produced that. And it was a movie of Quadrophenia, which was a totally different subject matter. We decided that the star of the movie was Quadrophenia, the work. So we didn't need stars. So not like we did with Tommy. So all of the cast were unknown. And we got loads of, we did lots of auditions, and the girl who was the casting director, Patsy Pollock, came up with some really good people. And one of them was Sting. Another one was Ray Winston. And virtually every one of those, Toya Wilcox, virtually every one of those young guys in that film went on to become really good, renowned actors, And Sting said to me, he said, "I've got a band." I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "What are they called?" He said, "Police." I said, "Oh." I said, "What label are you on?" He said, "I'm on A&M." I said, "Well, the MD of A&M is an old friend of mine, Derek Green." I said, "He's good, He said, "Yeah, well, we released a single and it didn't really work," he said, "but we're talking about releasing another one, or we might re-release that." So I said, "Oh, okay." So just after the film was finished, they re-released the song, and it was Roxanne, and it took off, and he gradually, over a period, became a big star. But the film itself did tremendously.
So they heard you really well, they're playing.
Yeah, and I've got these other bands.
You've got these other bands,
and everything's good. And The Who, in those days, were really extraordinary. I mean, a force to be reckoned with, And they went through the roof. I mean, if I put a show up on sale, people would leave their jobs, run away from the cash register just to get tickets. It was incredible. And
massive concerts.
Oh, massive. I mean, selling out things in 20 minutes, like huge. And we did stadiums. And I'll never forget, they played 3 nights at Shea Stadium, 2 nights in most stadiums, and they would sell out very, very quickly.
And Bill, I wanted to ask you, because you've left a few bands that you've managed as well over the years out. There's a few other big names there, isn't there?
Yeah, I managed the guys from Led Zeppelin. I had a short spell with UB40. And,
not a bad band, Led Zeppelin either.
No, Led Zeppelin. I had Jimmy Page and Robert Plant. Yeah. Jimmy Page was with me for like 14 years. Robert Plant was with me for 27 years. And it was a good trip. It was good.
If you're interested in watching the video content of this interview and many others, or interested in learning from world leaders and teachers, go to www.thebestyou.online.
How is it possible to manage 2 bands like that? I mean, the size of those bands. I mean, how did you do it? I mean, because they can be challenging, I suppose.
Oh, yeah. I'm going to become a psychiatrist next. I'm going to get my degree in psychiatry. No, there's a lot of...
it's a lot of work.
Whatever they would say, there's a lot of jealousy as well. And but it's not easy. But if you can delegate the day-to-day stuff to somebody, and then you just dive in on the real problems.
What would you say your best assets have been then to be able to do what you've done so far?
I don't know about assets or qualities, but I was able to, when I was at school, my two best subjects were English literature and maths. And usually they don't go together. Mm. You know, my daughter's quite artistic, but she's not scientific. And I found that I was able to negotiate and do deals, and it knew exactly what I was doing in my mind in terms of percentages, points and whatever. And I also learned at a later date, not early on, but at a later date, that if I was having a business lunch, I would let them drink and I wouldn't. And then I'd know exactly what I was doing. And I think and the other thing, I was always honest with the people I was dealing with. I've got an old friend, Doug Morris, who runs Sony Music. He's the head of Sony in New York. And recently I was with him 2 weeks ago, and we were having lunch, and a guy came in who's one of his label managers, and he introduced me to him, and he said, "This is Bill. We're old friends. He's the only man in the music business that I can do a deal with on a handshake," which made me feel great, you know, because I've always tried to stick to what I say, and what I say I'm going to do, I have to stick to it. And I've detached myself from certain artists as a result of that principle of being really honest and clear and clean with them, you know. And so that's another sort of point, an asset, I suppose. And the other thing I think I had was or still got, I suppose, was when we were in a confused situation and there was lots of different stuff going down, I was able to go straight to the kernel of the problem, straight to the centre of it, and say, look, don't worry about that shit and that. This is the important bit. This is it. And so I think a combination of things, you know, that you need to have in order to successfully manage artists' careers. But also you have to have an artistic side. You know, it's not all about business. You have to have a feel for the music, a feel for what they should do.
And Bill, just to finish, you bought the rights of another book quite a few years ago, The Railway Man.
Yeah.
And, that's going to come out soon.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
We just locked it in on last Friday. Finally locked it, because the whole editing process, you analyse it and you analyse it and you analyse it, and you've got to get the pace right, you've got to get the ending right, you've got to get this and that, and it's just taken us a little bit of time to get it right. But I think we've got it a great cut now. And what happened was, a friend of mine said, "You should read this book, it's a great book." So I read it and I thought, God, what a great story.
Well, this was a few years ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, this was 11, 12 years ago. Mm. So I thought, what a great story, that'll make a great film. So I phoned up the publishers and I found out that the writer lived in Berwick-on-Tweed. So I arranged to go down and see him and his wife, and I went down and I had lunch with them, and it transpired that they were talking to a Canadian company about the rights. Somebody else had the rights and said you couldn't make this film because it covered so much of a person's life. You had to use different actors for the young person and the older person. Anyway, and they were about to, I got the sense they were about to do a deal with this Canadian company. I persuaded them to do it with me. We got on great, and I convinced him that I had the feeling to make the right film. Came away from it, got a script written, budgeted that script, and it was about $60 million. And it was like a big war epic. 3 years went by. I renewed the option, and I kept renewing the option. And then finally, I joined forces with a chap called Andy Patterson, good film producer, made lots of good films. And we got the script stripped down, revamped the script, and got it to become a different story to the first script. This was the story we wanted. This was very closely tied to the story in the book. Because Patterson knew Colin Firth, because he made a movie with him before, which was The Girl with the Pearl Earring, which was based on the life of Vermeer, the painter. He gave the script to Colin Firth, and Colin Firth said, I've got to make this film. I really want to make this film, you know. So that was the breakthrough. And then we got Nicole Kidman. We got a fabulous actor called Stellan Skarsgård, who, as soon as you see him, you recognise him from other movies. And a young boy called Jeremy Irvine, who's in Spielberg's film of War Horse, and he's in Great Expectations recently, who gives a superb performance. So I think we've got a really good film,
Yeah, it looks like a fantastic film.
Yeah, I think so. I hope so. And I'm moving on. I've got a couple of other things I'm scripting at the moment. And, yeah.
So you're taking it easy now?
No, stop and die. You can't do that. You know, much of what we do in our lives can be wasted energy, or we can find good fortune in various ways. But one of the things that comes back to me quite often is a quote from Gandhi, and he said, "Why run so fast if you're running in the wrong direction?" And so much of our lives, we do that. We try to get there with great speed, and then we find out afterwards we're going down the wrong road. And so I think you only acquire this ability to think about that as we get older. And I guess it's choosing the right road. And I know the road to death is to do nothing. Just carry on working.
Bill, it's been great. Thank you very much. Thank you, and thank you for watching Inspiring People. Bill, thank you. That was brilliant. Thank you very much, mate. Cheers. That was great.
You.
For more information, go to www.thebestyou.co.